I have a question for you. Are you growing? Now, it's not physical growth that I'm talking about, because that doesn't require any effort except eating. But mental and spiritual growth should be a lifelong quest for us all, both as individuals and as a church. Today we're coming to number 4 in our vision values, Christ Church, a growing church. And we're not just thinking numbers, although hopefully that will come later. The question then is, how do we grow? Bearing in mind, it's not just up to us. The good news is that only God can produce growth. Paul said in his letter to the Corinthians, I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God made it grow. Now, as Hilary will tell you, I'm not a gardener, but one thing I do know is to get a good plant, you have to prepare the soil first, you then plant the seed, and you water it, keep back the weeds, maybe fight 1 or 2 slugs, and then just wait. It will grow. Similarly with babies. You feed one end, you clean the other end, you cuddle it, or him or her, and then let them sleep, and they will grow. And then when they grow up, it can be the same with knowledge, education. Create a desire, and then, to know more about football or fashion or computer games. They will grow, they will learn all about it. If you cast your mind back, the first question they usually ask is, why? Why? In each of these examples, to encourage growth, we need to actually provide the right conditions. For example, if a plant requires a lot of sunlight and we plant it in the shade, it won't thrive if it survives at all. It's the same with kids in class. In education, the good teacher doesn't just impart information. They create the desire to know more, and then they provide opportunities to learn and grow. Fine, so how does that apply to us then as a church? Are we growing, both as a church and as individuals? Now, in our action plan growing group, as we've called it now, looking at the 4th of our vision points, we have focused on 3 areas that we feel as a church we need to address. Number 1, we need to grow ourselves, setting down strong spiritual roots and foundations. Number 2, we need to provide training and encouragement, both in terms of practical leadership and in terms of spiritual understanding. Number 3, we need to make home groups more accessible to those who find them just a little distant and threatening. Now, I'm now going to consider each one of those in a little bit more detail. So, number 1, growing ourselves. Now, again, to encourage growth, we need to provide the right conditions, and we must want to grow. Now, there's an assumption that as Christians that we must read and understand the Bible, and that's how we grow. But with only 1 or 2 exceptions, we're not all Bible scholars. And there are many things in the Bible that are rather difficult to understand. But to quote Mark Twain, it ain't those parts of the Bible I can't understand that bother me, it's the parts I do understand. Well, the great news is you don't need to understand it all. Who does anyway? Life is one day at a time, and that's how we need to live it. If you're going on a walk, you need just a map for that particular journey. The rest of the country can wait for another day. Although it's worth bearing in mind that that map is of limited use unless you actually go on the journey. Now, the Bible talks about walking in the light. Let me explain a little bit about it. You've just become a Christian. You've put your faith in God, And he accepts you just as you are, no strings attached, no conditions. He loves you. It's what's called amazing grace. Cast your mind back to when you first had a love of probably another person. Was that wonderful? It's the same sort of scenario. So here we are. This is you. Sorry about the drawing. You want to please the Lord. You want to read his word, the Bible. The psalmist David says, "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." And so therefore it gives us some ideas of how to live. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Love your neighbour as yourself. Be prepared to go that extra mile. It's rather like a spotlight's been shown upon you, and suddenly you've got these three little snakes. Areas of your life that you need to address, that you need to think about. But you're a keen young Christian, and you have the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, so you can deal with these snakes. One at a time, sort those out so that you consider those things, not letting the sun go down on your anger, loving your neighbour, being prepared to do just that extra bit. And at that stage, you are walking 100% in the light. That's what the Lord has shown you to address. That's what you have addressed. The only snake is, as you can see, the light then gets a bit brighter and there's a bigger circle, and we've got a few more snakes to deal with. And some of those can be much bigger snakes. Oh dear, I've got to forgive those who sin against me and love not just my neighbour, but my enemy. And take up your cross and follow me. Bit harder as you go on in the Christian life. But you learn to trust in the Holy Spirit. And so you can deal with those snakes in his strength. That's how we grow and mature as a Christian. Walking in the light as he reveals things to you, just responding to the Bible teaching as you learn it, applying it a bit at a time, day by day. Do you remember learning French in school? You may have thought that it was to learn and pass an exam, but actually that wasn't the real reason at all. The real reason is so that when you go on holiday, you can order a nice meal when you're in France. And it's exactly the same with the Bible. For best results, follow the Maker's instructions. Now, Mary is not here today because she's gone to Outwood for there's a confirmation service, but you may remember a couple of weeks ago she shared about these little booklets, which you can take, there's several of them on this table at the back, just to introduce you to different passages in the Bible to help you look at them. If you haven't got one of these, do grab one afterwards, they're free. They're quite helpful, or very helpful even. I do acknowledge, however, that bits of the Bible can be rather daunting. The good news is we're not called by God to be Bible scholars. We are, however, called to be witnesses. Jesus said to the disciples, "You will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." And in his first letter, Peter says, "Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect." Now, in court, a witness is only called upon to tell what they have seen, what they personally know to be true, not what someone else heard or believes. And there was a very good example of this in our reading today, the man born blind. He says, "One thing I know, once I was blind, now I can see." I don't know if you noticed, but it's interesting to see how his faith grew throughout the period of that reading. At the beginning, when he's talking to his neighbours, he says, "the man they call Jesus." Later, when he's talking to the Pharisees, he then says he's a prophet. Then later again, after the Pharisees had thrown him out, when Jesus meets him another time, which is just after the reading we had, Jesus says, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" "Who is he, sir?" the man asked. "Tell me so that I may believe in him." Jesus said, "You have now seen him. In fact, he's the one speaking with you." And the man then said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. So his faith increased over that period. That's the same with us. When we have to explain to others what we believe and why, it often helps us to think through what we do actually believe. And that's all part of this process of spiritual growth. So, are you growing? Are we growing? And do we want to grow? That was the first thing that we felt we needed to look at. The second is to provide training and encouragement. Now, there are two ways of learning how to swim. You could take lessons, or you can be thrown in the deep end. I don't know about you, but I don't fancy being thrown in the deep end. But that is often what we do in church. Can you run the children's group? Oh, and by the way, you'll learn it as you go along. In our growing group discussions, we agreed that we need to address this lack of training and encouragement, and we've scheduled that to start early next year. And it's not just for the children group leaders. We all need to grow, as I've just been hammering on about, as individuals and as groups and as a church. And we're aware that we need to cater for all sorts of different levels of spiritual experience and commitment. We don't know where everyone is in their faith journey. Maybe you don't know where you are either. So we're going to be giving something on basic Christian belief, maybe Alpha, maybe Christianity Explored, and something a bit more advanced on the application of Christian principles to life, and also looking at some of those harder questions which we don't get the chance to discuss in detail in church. And that's all I'm going to say about that for now. It's a case of watch this space, and then the details will emerge. If you do have any thoughts or questions or ideas on that, do have a word with one of us afterwards. Number 3, make home groups more accessible. Now, in case you didn't know, we currently have 8 home groups meeting locally in the village, with something over 50 people attending on a regular basis. And each one of them has a slightly different ethos. Some of them meet weekly, some of them fortnightly. Some of them begin with a meal, having followed it on from an Alpha course. Others just have light refreshments. Some of them concentrate on prayer and sharing, whereas others will spend time studying the Bible or another book or video and then discussion. Most of them meet on a Wednesday night or a Thursday night, although one of them does move around depending on when people can manage. And there's another one for older folk on a Monday morning. Some of the members are regular Sunday church attenders, and others are not. And the actual number in the groups can vary between roughly 8 and 12. What is the point of a home group? Well, there are several points, but the main ones are to get to know people better than you can in church on a Sunday, to get beyond that superficial contact and actually become friends, where you get to the stage of caring for each other in times of need. Take time to discuss in greater depth the details of Christian faith and other related issues. In church, you get a little talk from someone up here, but you don't get a chance to ask the questions and maybe throw a few spanners in the works to get people to really think. There's only been one occasion I can think of when someone actually dared to interrupt a sermon. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened yet today. It also gives you the chance to ask those awkward questions or to express doubts without ending up feeling stupid. And we all do go through those periods when we want to ask questions and when we have doubts. In some groups, not all of them at the moment, you do also get the chance to learn how to lead the group, because you can take it in turns to lead. There's a John Ortberg book which we looked at in our group with the wonderful title, "If You Want to Walk on Water, You've Got to Get Out of the Boat." Maybe you don't want to walk on water, and maybe you don't want, therefore, to get out of the boat, but that's okay too. It's a safe place to make mistakes, that's the point. So overall, it's a good place to learn, to grow, and to live as Christians, with a little help from your friends. Does that all sound a bit scary? Fortunately, it's not all that scary. Someone who actually mentioned that this is a problem that people can have is my friend over there, Claire Barker, and she's very kindly volunteered to come and do a little scary thing by coming up the front and just sharing her own experience of being in a home group.
Yes, not sure how much of the willing volunteer. I've been asked to talk a little bit about my experience of home groups. I joined my first home group when I was a teenager. Going to church on Sundays was about listening, not questioning or discussing, and that's where home groups fitted in. A group of us would meet once a week with a leader, a bit like a Sunday school group, and we would read the Bible, have discussions, and pray about it. Moving on 20-something years, that is how I still see home groups. A small group of people who want to learn more about the Bible and Christianity. I was lucky to be directed towards a lovely group of people who meet once a fortnight for about an hour and a half. We're of varying ages and are at varying stages of our Christian journeys. I hope no one from the group will be offended when I say that none of us have all the answers, but we do listen and are all trying to grow in our Christian faith. We tend to take a particular focus for about 6 weeks. It might be a particular aspect from the Bible, or learning about how other people live out their Christian lives, and reflecting on our own beliefs and understandings. If you're not part of a home group, I would strongly recommend that you try one out. They're not scary. I find it a peaceful time to reflect and to grow. On the note of growing, I've come up with an idea. Having said that people in my home group do not know all the answers, they are more knowledgeable than me about the Bible. So I have decided to try to read the Bible in a year. But more than that, I would like to challenge you to read the Bible in a year with me. I would love to try to get a group of people organised and ready to start the challenge on the 1st of January. I imagine it being like a book club, so that we could encourage each other to keep going and have chats and discussions about what we've read. I know how busy everyone is, so we don't have to have formal meetings, maybe just little conversations when we bump into each other. If you're sitting there thinking, that sounds like an interesting idea, or I might like to do that, please do act on it. There's not much time between now and the 1st of January. Talk it over with your family and friends, encourage as many people as you can to get involved as well. I think it could be a really exciting experience and an adventure for all of us. Please let me know if you're interested, or sign up to the list that I'll put at the back of the church. And I'll be mentioning it to people at St Peter's and St Paul's and at the village school as well, to try and get as many people involved as possible. There are different options for reading the Bible in a year, so on the list at the back, if you could indicate whether you would be somebody who would like to read it on the internet, or if you are a person who would prefer to read the paper version, then that's fine, and I will try to cater for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, and well done, Claire. So, that's our values. We aim to be a welcoming, worshipping, serving church, growing in maturity and in numbers. And all that is possible with prayer, but that's our subject for next week. Thank you very much.